This is On the Road with Rojo Buffalo, Episode 4, The Oregon Trail in Central Idaho, featuring special guest Colton Cook.
We will see you next time. We're Yellowcard. Thank you guys so much.
Okay, so we're just driving back from Boise, Idaho. We just went to see our favorite band. What band this week, Colton?
We got to see Yellowcard. They were freaking awesome.
That's for sure. As we're driving, I keep thinking, we have a pretty easy trip. We have gas stations we can stop out every 30, 40 miles. We're in a nice air-conditioned car. We have a smooth road to drive on because the roads are better here in Idaho than they are in Utah, right, Colton?
Way better.
We are going to tell you about a road that was not smooth, but that really revolutionized our country. What trail are we going to be on, Colton?
We're going to go see the Oregon Trail. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. So stay tuned and we'll show you around. Few places on Earth are as abundant with natural resources as the Pacific Northwest, teeming with fish, game, timber, and farmable land. To many people living in the mid-1800s, this region seemed like one more opportunity to live the American dream. There was one problem, and that was that the region was many hundreds of miles away from the population center of the eastern states. Without the transportation technology we enjoy today, only one route was possible for those eager to make the journey to the Pacific Northwest. It was a route that could be traversed by wagon and foot, one surely not for the faint of heart. This is the Oregon Trail. And as Americans do, they hit the road. Between the mid-1830s and late 1860s, the Oregon Trail and other connected trails were crossed by about 400,000 settlers, farmers, miners, ranchers, and business owners, along with their families. Those brave pioneers were built of iron, with the determination to succeed and build strong foundations we don't see as often in folks today. Hard as iron was the idea, and although most across the plains seldom had money for the new and best and made do with what they had, one ox, one wagon wheel could be all that kept them from getting stuck up the creek without a paddle on a frozen prairie. Although we're not car salesmen, Colton and I will give you a test drive on some wagons that were used to cross the plains. One wagon may be owned by a family or shared among the company. The covered canvas roof was a helpful way to keep goods and belongings dry. Surely the luxurious alternative to pulling a handcart across the plains, as many of my pioneer ancestors did. This wagon is of the usual design that pioneers would use as they were traveling. Now, think about it. If you've ever been on a road trip, even for a week, you'll know that stuff adds up fast. These pioneers were expecting to travel for 3 months and then land in who knows where. Oftentimes, preparing as much as they could, pioneers quickly filled up their storage with pounds of bacon, lard, flour, sugar, tools, weapons for hunting, whatever they could find. Now, this wagon has a particularly cool story. This wagon actually traveled the entire Oregon Trail in 1975 as a commemorative ceremony. Sadly, most of the deaths that occurred on the Oregon Trail were not things that you'd seen in a Hollywood Western. One of the main ways that people lost their lives in the Oregon Trail was in wagon accidents. With the constant movement of wagons, of livestock, of people, oftentimes people would lose their lives in wagon accidents due to the wheels or to livestock.
Back in the day, if you had enough money, you could afford one of these Conestoga wagons, which would be basically riding in style across the plains.
The trail wasn't paved, but rather rutted by wagon wheels who had crossed before.
In front of me here are the Oregon Trail ruts left over from the wagons that traveled across the plains.
Now, the Oregon Trail is not quite like I-15. I'll name some differences for you. First, look all around here. We don't see a lot of trees. We don't see a lot of water. We don't even see outhouses. We see a lot of plains, a lot of different plant life such as sagebrush, goat heads, sunflowers, as you can see here. Travelers quickly found that they're journeying through a desert-like prairie where food and water are scarce. Oftentimes, their days included hunting surrounding wildlife to supplement their meager rations of food. I mean, who needs McDonald's when you can roast a giant quail on the fire? Whenever possible, I like to use actual on-site footage to tell my on-the-road stories. Here I'll use a beautiful train station mural illustrating the history of one trail town, Glenns Ferry, Idaho. It was painted by members of the Glenns Ferry Revitalization Committee. Death was a constant companion on the trail. It's estimated that as many as 20 to 30,000 people died on it. The majority of deaths occurred because of diseases caused by poor sanitation. Hunger was an ever-present ache as well. The trail's most tragic travelers were that of the Donner Party, whose lack of food turned them to cannibalism after incorrect timing of the seasons got them stuck in the Sierra Nevada mountains in the winter of 1846. Sensationalized accounts of violent encounters with Native American tribes frightened many travelers who were unfamiliar with the frontier. In actuality, they usually didn't harass the travelers. Knowing the land well, Native Americans often gave helpful advice and traded resources to the pioneers. Some of these same tribes had even been helpful to explorers Lewis and Clark decades before. The Oregon Trail was something that was highly advertised, both by the United States government and by people that had explored it. Captain Benjamin Bonneville, when coming across the Boise Valley, saw after many, many miles of traveling through this sagebrush and weeds as I just described, he saw the Snake River. The Snake River surrounded by many trees. This later became a refuge for many people that settled in the area. The pioneers used geography to their advantage. Here I'm standing on a ridgeline overlooking Boise. Standing on the ridge, Captain Bonneville looked across the valley. According to tradition, when Captain Bonneville and his men saw the trees from the ridge in 1833, they exclaimed in French, "Les bois, voyez les bois," or in English, the woods, see the woods. Boise is now known for its nickname, the City of Trees. The Boise-Nampa metropolitan area now hosts a population of almost 800,000. I mean, it was big enough to get our favorite band and us up here. The Oregon Trail strikes off to the right and leaves us alone in our glory, with no other goal before us but death or the diggings. William Bryany, 1868.
A noble spirit embiggens the smallest man.
Who put the Simpsons quote in there? Geography determines history. Here behind me you have the Snake River. Now the Snake River was the biggest obstacle these pioneers had to cross as they were going across the Oregon Trail. River crossings were a very dangerous and difficult affair. Oftentimes, animals and wagons were lost. One way that they crossed the river, here in Glenns Ferry, Idaho, is they would cross 3 islands in the river, trying their best not to lose anything along the way. Oftentimes, they needed the help of Shoshone Indians in order to make the crossing of the 3 islands. The 3-island crossing was a very important tool in helping people cross the river. Even after the railroads came in and replaced the Oregon Trail, essentially, this area was still very helpful. A ferry was built by a man named Gustavus that helped people cross the river in order to get supplies to people south of the river. That ferry was built in 1869. Now, the system that they used to get the ferry across the river was quite ingenious. They used tow cables to transport the ferry from one edge of the river to the other. Gustavus Glen's ferry was helpful in helping many farmers transport their goods across the river from 1869 until the 1920s.
Back in the 1860s and 70s, they would have used ferries built similarly to this one to ferry wagons and supplies across the river.
It felt pretty cool to be Indiana Jones for a minute, finding this ferry and its tow cable by the river, then guessing how they worked. Then realizing the huge impact this ferry had made to building the community. It reminded me of why I love filming on-location history. You get to find the pieces of history themselves and step back in time to be a part of it. The official length of the Oregon Trail, from St. Louis on the Missouri River to Oregon City near the Pacific Coast, spans 2,170 miles. Those who did make it to the end of the Oregon Trail did indeed find fertile land for farms and many other economic opportunities, such as ranching, mining, and logging. Cities like Portland, Spokane, Seattle, and Boise very much owe their success to those who crossed the trail. Okay, where's our first stop at, Colton?
We are at the Oregon Trail trailhead in Boise, Idaho.
There have been great preservation efforts made to commemorate the history of the trail, including plaques, monuments, and even reenactments. And of course, don't forget the classic 1985 Oregon Trail computer game. I am glad to say that I am old enough to have played this game in elementary school, and it was the bomb. One person that made an effort to preserve the trail was Ezra Meeker. Ezra had made the trek when he was a young boy, and in his later years, he wanted to reenact the journey again.
On an expedition across the United States, Ezra Meeker stopped at many cities along the way and ultimately ended up in Washington, D.C., where he met with President Theodore Roosevelt to create enough funding to build many monuments like the one we're standing under today.
Here we see Ezra Meeker as he crosses Wall Street and meets with President Theodore Roosevelt. What a man. What a journey. So what ended the Oregon Trail? I guess it's what it began with, the use of horse and wagon. Except this horse was made of iron.
Nowadays, we have better forms of travel, like, in this case, zip lines.
The great transcontinental zip lines. And, of course, the railroad. After the Golden Spike was driven at Promontory Point, Utah in 1869, the railroad connected east to west and brought millions of immigrants across the United States in leisurely days by train in what used to take exhausting months on foot. Just as the freeway connects major cities and businesses today, many communities, businesses, even national parks started to open up and expand along the railroad. In his speech at the driving of the Golden Spike, church leader Brigham Young said, "We want to hear the iron horse puffing through this valley. May God continue the unity of our country, and this railroad unites the two great oceans of the world." While the route of the Oregon Trail still existed, the use of trains proved to be much more practical, being able to carry people at only a fraction of the time that it took to make the perilous journey on wagons. The railroad has connected our country in ways that we could have never imagined. The Oregon Trail connected us. The freeway connects us. Now social media connects us. What new connections will we find as humans to communicate with each other, to travel from one place to another? That's the excitement of the future. Looks like our train is on its way. We better go catch our ride.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Woo!